Hi everybody, and I think and hope we are live. Give me a heads up in the chat if you can hear and see me okay, and I'll get talking about what I'm going to talk about. I hope you all had a good weekend. I kind of did. Didn't do too much, to be honest. I'm not doing at the moment is I'm researching a specific topic. So anybody there in the chat gets a heads up to give me a 5x5 would be appreciated. But yeah, I've been researching Japan. I'm trying to go back to. Okay. Sorry, my headphones are talking to me there. That's just my problem. Never mind. But sorry, I'm gonna have to fix my headphones in a sec. I'll tell you anyway. Yeah, I want to review. I wanted to look at post-war Japan, the post-war occupation Japan, and learn a bit about that, and maybe do a video on it in time. But I find it quite hard to focus on a specific topic. Sorry, I'm kind of multitasking here, which actually speaks to my point, because I find it difficult to kind of, in one sense, do prepare for videos, kind of get like a daily news roundup together, but also be like neck deep, we'll say, on a different topic. You know what I mean? So what I'm thinking of doing, in a way, I'm just going to test out my audio here as well. Sorry, lads, I should have done this before. What I'm thinking of kind of doing, I'm going to play the stream back to myself. Yeah, there we go. So my audio is not working. Yeah, we'll get there. Is taking basically what I'm kind of learning every day, or I have a tendency to go down rabbit holes as well, big time. So just basically taking those and making videos out of them, which the thing I worry about then is that sorry, I'm trying to multitask. 2 seconds. There we go. Got it. Delighted. I was kind of stranded there a little bit. But so yeah, to take those things basically and maybe do streams out of them. So if they're not like, yeah, it might be there might be a lot of streams about Japan, random bits of Japanese history from the last 70 odd years, and actually more. It could be even from the last 120, 30 years. I find it very hard to control my limits on a topic. So, and what I've decided as well, maybe as a wise thing to do, is to stand on the shoulders of giants, as they say, to kind of just pick 2 or 3 textbooks that are good on kind of a general subject, and basically work off of those exclusively. That way you're kind of limited. Yeah, so I'm back to, I don't know, I started with a very specific topic, or kind of, and then it's just branched out to I don't know what. Anyway, I want to start on something else, just a subplot here. So this is something I should have mentioned a couple of weeks ago. It was on Orla Red's channel, I saw it on Telegram. The source was Ipsos or something like that. I don't know, but it's a reputable source anyway. It's a reputable thing. And it found that, what do we have here? So this was a poll of Irish people. Should EU countries, including Ireland, take in more refugees? And 53% disagreed, 35% agreed. So overall, what you would call an overwhelming agreement or a disagreement to that statement, agreement with, let's say, my proposal that we should not, which is very white pilling, very encouraging. And the gender breakdown, so it was 36% of men, which is this, disagreed or agreed. I don't know, I'll ignore the gender one, but yeah, I think this was actually made by Orla Red, this graphic. I'm not sure. But anyway, point being, all right, I haven't researched that well enough. But point being, I haven't shared it either, have I? Can you see my screen? No. I'm totally bollocks up tonight, aren't I? Here we go. There you go. You can see it now. I completely forgot to actually prepare the stream in the slightest. Just pressed go live. And it just dawned on me afterwards. Yeah, so basically the majority of people are against it, which is great for, in one sense, you could say maybe it's the work that's been done against asylum centers by people like us. or even if it's not, who cares? Point is, going forward, there's a complete mandate for it, and I always felt that way in towns like in your Oughterards and your Mavilles and all these places. Is that, listen, however much controversy comes down from RTE and from NGOs, and it feels bad for me because I feel like I'm in the thick of it here, and I'm a social creature as well. I don't take pleasure in being ostracized, right? Nobody does that. So the only comfort I would have to myself of that feeling of impending pressure and ostracization, and I'm saying, I'm being ostracized from the kind of national community of NGO people and all that, the people that kind of decide what discourse is. That's a very bad feeling. But I would take comfort in myself that I would say, listen, I've spoken to all the people here in this town, or like I've spoken to loads of them. I've seen them make votes in their community halls and stuff. They're all against it. They're all reasonably against it. They're justified. There's a mandate for this. Nobody can come and tell me. That's one thing I would always say, is that if people said, actually, we voted that we do want asylum seekers en masse, or we want them in our hotels or whatever, the last thing I would want to be is there. I'd just go, listen, okay, whatever. Like, I would only dare to involve myself in a situation or a movement. Maybe not a movement, but in a very specific form of activism. If I feel like there's a majority, silent or otherwise, kind of in favor of it. And that's not a blanket statement I'm making there, but you know what I'm saying. It's a consolation for that negative feeling when you're ostracized, that you just go, listen, you can call me bad, you can call me terrible, but there's been a poll of people in the country, and like, what is it? 35% agree that we should take in more. 53% disagree, and 12 don't know. So like, you're talking the don't knows. I mean, we all know which ways the don't knows are going. So we're talking 65% of people. So again, people go, you're a very bad person, you're terrible and all this. And you just go, I don't know, you can call me bad or good or in the middle, or I don't know about the moral stuff. But what I do know is that if you grab 100 people out in off the street here, 65% of them are going to be on my side. So I don't know, are we all bad? So it's great. I just want to say hello to you all in the chat here while I can still get my head around it. Someone says, who's the clown in the thumbnail? Just a random man giving a speech about capitalism or something like that, and I put a clown head on him. I don't know. That's why I was a bit late actually making that. So not only did I switch on the audio, I didn't switch on the audio, I didn't put the screen on, and I also was about to go live. I was like, shit, I need a thumbnail. So I don't know. I often wonder, should I be naming names here? Someone might come on with their real name and not like to be named. I don't know. I assume you're okay with it. So Graham Reardon says only 53% fake news. Oh, like it should be more. Yeah, I mean, possibly. It could be what's that called again? There's a word for it when a poll sample, the person is nervous about giving their true feelings. There's a word for that. I've forgotten it. What's Emmanuel saying? Emmanuel Godson. Yeah, that was a great stream. If you're watching there, I enjoyed that conversation very much. Dave Cullen and Dolores Cahill. I haven't seen that video yet. I must watch that soon. I'll try to watch it tomorrow if I can. It's funny, I asked Dolores when I interviewed her about this, and it's kind of weird to think about. I have to see when this was actually. Let me just allow me to have a look, to indulge myself here. I asked her about this, but we were talking about, like, in fairness, we were talking about her election run and all of that, so it wasn't relevant, and we didn't go too deeply into it, but I did ask, and it's just surreal now to think back to it, because at the time it was, when I asked her about this, it was just a kind of, what would you call it? Like a fringe story in the news, as far as I can remember anyway. It was a kind of it felt like a kind of like, yeah, every few months there's another potential virus and this and that comes out, and you generally ignore them. At the time, it was February the 2nd. And I asked about, I think my question was kind of pointing in the direction of like, what I had in my mind at the time anyway, is that like globalism is on very shaky ground of like this kind of supply chain world and all of this. So could a virus or a pandemic like this be a stick in the spokes to the kind of global order or whatever? And it seems now, I most people on YouTube, my contemporaries anyway, Irish and stuff, seem to have taken the opposite stance to that. And again, it's not a stance, it's not whatever, you could say it's not a stance, it's about facts and all this kind of stuff. But do you know what? Things are only ever about facts so much. There is a kind of a personal ethos and instinct that you put into your decision making, as well as facts. I'm not saying facts are irrelevant, but there's just a thing. And so I think my natural instinct was to kind of, I don't naturally lean to the conservative or libertarian kind of position on things. And so maybe that makes me an authoritarian or definitely not a progressive or liberal, but it's just an instinct thing. And it's about populism as well. There's a little bit of populism there too that informs it. And of course then as well, which weeks ago I said, there's reason enough to shut down for this for a while anyway, whatever. But facts aside, again, I'm not saying I don't care about facts or I'm not interested in them, but let's just, the time of, I've done a bit of that and whatever. And to be honest, I haven't looked at the virus in a few weeks. If it's cooling off now, I don't know. My initial take was just that, hey, rock with the shutdowns for a while and just whatever. But I didn't feel like, oh no, they're going to take over the world and make us all live in pods because of it. I don't know. It's all a bit up in the air, this. And at the moment, I don't even know, are the New York stats up or down or blah, 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 blah. I don't know. And I don't hugely care. Again, the facts are one thing. My general instinct on this was a more populist and a more, anti. There is something good, I think, about people not consuming their bollocks off for a while, stuff like that. The idea that an authoritarian regime would do all this stuff to you, I kind of go, look at the regime we live under as is, this replacement regime, this kind of work to drink at the weekend, work your way through the 5 days just to drink at the weekend, to kind of and Netflix and all of that. And I don't mean to be a misanthrope where it's like, oh, the world is fucked, I don't care how bad it gets after this, it can't get worse. No, the world isn't bad, but I just felt like, listen, it's not like we're going from some pastoral, Shire-esque, world of freedom and harmony into, Blade Runner 2049. We're going from a bit of a shambles into what seems to be, the unemployment is bad, but, I know there are negative aspects to it. It's all nuance, but it's just, I'm talking about my general instinct, zooming out a little bit, and my general just feelings. What I'm trying to talk about is, and it's something I wonder, I would love if people who are more, let's say, skeptical of it, skeptical of the whole, and I understand that it's legitimate and a completely reasonable point of view, the libertarian kind of conservative point of view on the pandemic and all of that. I would love if people who espouse those points of view, which, by the way, in case you think I'm pointing at any one person, there are so many people who espouse this point of view that I couldn't possibly be, right? So I'm not subtweeting someone here. This is dozens of people I can think of, right? The people who are of that position, and they might have good facts and all that on it, I would love if kind of they would do. I would love if they would do what I just did in the last 10 minutes, which is to just say, listen, fact legitimately, if we're being honest, can kind of be looked at either way very often on especially on a thing like this, right? And it's up in the air, and how much can we ever really know? It's in flux, it's all that, whatever, right? What I'm doing is I'm putting on the table and admitting my instinctual motivations, my kind of gut desire, my just feeling on it. What the so for the people who I would describe as conservative libertarian type of thing, like, would those people agree that it's coming from so just to do that thing of like, I wonder where my, I'm not some kind of robot where my point of view is just because it's the truth. Yeah, that can be malleable. Who knows? Let's go beyond that and admit that we come to our points of view from things that bring you into it, a kind of the general motivation. And I would love to hear a self-described take on that. And I suppose maybe it is just freedom, liberty to, someone could say it's the liberty to go more than 2 kilometers from your own home. Fair enough. Good enough answer, I suppose. But I don't know, anyway, I'm not trying to say the people who are skeptical of the lockdown are all some kind of like pigeonholed libertarians. That's not fair either. It'd be like them saying, I'm a paid pandemic shill or something. I hate when people are unfair to each other. Like that conversation's just, stupid. 57 in the house. Very good. Nice to see you all. Someone here, Lord, I can't pronounce the name, says, was I thinking of the Bradley effect? That could possibly be what I was talking about, yeah. I have a subject I wanted to get into tonight, and I'm already struck by kind of imposter syndrome of like, nobody. We got some people shouting up, and I'm just going to try to talk over them outside my my country estate house, I'm miles away polishing my I was going to say rifle. I don't have a rifle, but I was trying to LARP as if I live in a country estate, with a equine kind of style jacket. No, it's a bunch of shitheads out on the street talking, shouting over my important show. So as I was saying, okay, I have my screen shared. That's all good. Okay, so this might seem a bit like you might be kind of thinking, what is this? And that's what I was going to say. A slight feeling of imposter syndrome. I'm streaming and I'm kind of like, does anybody want to see any of this? I'm sure some of you do. So anyway, I'm looking up Japan, right? I've gotten a few books on it. I'm reading about it because I think I don't want to give the game away. And I feel like someone else will just make my video instead of me. But like I'll show my cards and somebody else will make an Unreal video, someone who's good at it. And you know what, if they do, fair play, I'll still try to make mine. What I want to do is make a few prepared longer videos. I was thinking of Keith Woods' Yugoslavia one was an excellent model. Now he far from invented the idea, right? Half of YouTube is full of them, but he's a kind of a nationalist and did one of those videos, and I know it struck a chord with a few people, not actually even the subject, just the style of it, that it's an effective style of video making, content creation, like a 20 minutes long video that has a kind of narrative, a theme, almost like a mini documentary, that you put up images and video clips and footage and music, and you kind of write a script and you talk over it, and it's a kind of a polished piece, unlike kind of obviously what I'm doing now, which is a completely different type of format. Am I talking too much? But yeah, so as I'm doing that anyway, like I described earlier, I've kind of pledged myself to doing nightly streams, and I actually do enjoy doing these, but I can't. I am going to end up mixing the two, where like I'll go down a rabbit hole on the Japan thing and just kind of feed it into this as a way to like combine both efforts, if you get me. And what I'm trying to do is not take the actual subject I'm trying to make the final video on and give it away in streams. Instead, take the rabbit hole. So when I'm researching this and I go down a rabbit hole that's tangential, I'll just draw a ring around that and put it into a stream and be like, there we go. So like I say, a lot of Japan stuff. This actually is related to Japan, but it's not. The themes or points I want to get at here are not, bear with me on this, right, are less related to Japan and more related to Keelings, right? And by the end of this video, if you watch, that should be clear. You should understand what I mean by this. So I found this channel. How to go about this? I found this channel while looking for videos just about Japan. I think it was about Japanese history. I was looking up information on YouTube about Zaibatsu, which were the basically like four major families or houses from the Meiji era of like late 19th century, up until World War II. There were these kind of four families or houses or whatever you would call it, almost like nobilities, who ran various industries, like kind of heavily corporatist or something like that in Japan. Some of them were like Mitsubishi, all of these. So I was looking them up. That's not really relevant. I was just looking them up, and I came across a video about Zaibatsu, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. And then I found this channel anyway, and it's got 5,000 subscribers, which is strange. Well, it's not. I'll tell you why it's strange. Is because I've got like 4,000, something like that, probably less. I don't know, something like that. But it's in the same, general ballpark, order of magnitude type of thing, right? And it's just this is just again another side point. It's just crazy for me that this channel has 5,000 subs when it's actually got like hundreds of videos, and they're all really well produced. You'll see in a second. Well, they're decent, and there's some interesting stuff there. So YouTube's just funny that way. And I sometimes come across channels that have 40,000 subs, and you're like, how does it work? how do some get big and some are really small? Some are smaller than mine, and they're a lot better than mine, and some are worse than mine and are a lot bigger. Whatever. It's strange, but what struck me about this channel anyway is that when I was learning about the Zaibatsu, whatever it is, from these guys, and they're kind of like boomer fellas. I'll describe them now in a sec. But I got the impression of what they were pretty quickly. I was like, these are really smart guys. Actually, it's rare you come across a bunch of guys online creating content who are really, really well informed. They're Yanks Americans, who are integrated into Japan. They've lived there probably for decades or whatever, and they're giving their take on lots of Japanese stuff. And they're very intelligent, and they're not NGO heads or deluded lefty kind of progressive Antifa types, but nor are they're not particularly like right wing either. They're just kind of it's called Langley Esquire, by the way. Yeah, someone says it there. You can see it on screen, I think. But what they are to me from the Zaibatsu video was kind of like, I don't mean cynical in the negative sense. I'm not trying to be derogatory. I mean cynical, if it's an appropriate use of the word, in the kind of detached sense, right? Someone says, is it like ADV China? It kind of is, and it kind of isn't, actually. I could maybe get into that in a while, but let's just put it this way. I'm not equating the same or the two, but you could say it's kind of like them in ways, right? But very different in some other ways. We'll get through it, right? But no, what they are, unlike the AVD guys, these guys are really kind of globalists and kind of capitalists and liberals. And again, I don't mean any of those in a negative sense or in a cartoonish sense, because I want to give these guys their dues. They're smart. I'd much rather talk to a smart, no offense to anybody, I'm sure you're all very smart in this chat, right? But I'd rather talk to a like intelligent, globalist than a like thick nationalist, right? Well, maybe I wouldn't, but I'd rather at least engage in intellectual discussion, this kind of intellectual pursuit. I'd rather listen to them and learn from them than learn from someone who I agree with, who's like thick. So these guys are very, very smart. They're very smart, but also they don't. Someone in the chat says, "Nah, I'm dumb as a stump." That's all right. But so these guys, what they are is kind of like suited and booted, kind of I don't know, liberal capitalist kind of economist type people, right? Something like that, kind of diplomatic type people, economist type people, almost like state kind of people, in a strange way, but very smart. and it's just funny how they. I can get into this as we go through it. Maybe I should just get into it, but there's a type of figure that interests me a lot, and it's the like the NGO person. I'm not going to name names. Think of the NGO shitheads in Ireland, right? The main ones you can think of. Those people are so unimportant. If you think they are the final boss in this kind of world, then you're sorely, sorely mistaken, because they are just like, I don't know. What are they? They're not worth like your thought at all. Like, they're worth your thought, I suppose, in the fact that they're paid to try to ruin your life and blah blah blah. Maybe, but in terms of like the ideology and the ideas and the intellectual battle and all of that, they're absolutely useless. It's almost like they don't even try really to have a any kind of like solid ideology. But they're just not worth your time in that sense. To me, the final boss, it isn't the kind of zany college lecturer, shall we say, with the horn-rimmed glasses, or the feminist lecturer, or the feminist author, or whatever. To me, it's the final boss, arguably, probably, is the economist, the neoliberal economist, who will, he might even grant you lots of your premises and be like, no, I'm not freaking out about so-called racism. They might be smart like that. They'd go, no, I'm not going to be hair triggered and telling you can and can't say this and that. What I am telling you is that the world works more efficiently this way, and they actually might. Someone says David McWilliams, potentially, actually, he's almost one of those types of people, and they could surprise you by actually understanding. You might think, oh, you don't understand anything. I go on YouTube and I go on Twitter and I'm a nationalist and I'm not afraid of taboos, so I'm really smart, right? And suddenly you're surprised that actually they know a lot of what you know, and they have arguments for those things and stuff, right? Those types are the final boss in a sense. To me, I don't. Now, it sounds like I'm admiring them. If I admired their arguments as much as that, then I would just be one of them. And the fact that I'm not tells you that I ultimately think those are the most flawed arguments out there. They're just good. They're thorough. They're smart, these guys. So you have two of these guys, or a couple of these guys, speaking about various things in Japan. And I took a look through some of their videos. I'm going to watch loads of them because they're very informative. The Zaibatsu thing was relatively apolitical. It was just talking about a historical thing, but it was these guys know what they're talking about. You know what I mean? They had an in-depth knowledge of it. The guy interviewing him and the interviewee, who was the real expert, but even the guy interviewing him had a really good knowledge of it, right? So respect where it's more warranted. But I did. There were a few little giveaway moments in that video, as apolitical as it was, is that I did get an impression. I was like, these guys are kind of suited and booted economist, globalist, kind of free tradeist, kind of American capitalism, liberalism, kind of like evangelists, kind of in a way as well. They're able to look at things from different perspectives, but I think when you peel it away, that's kind of what they are, right? I don't know why. I don't know who they're paid by. Actually, I do. I found that out since, but we'll go to that maybe later. Let's not worry about that and just treat them as a blank canvas. Some smart people you're listening to. Anyway, I then found some videos that lended themselves more to political topics, to less mundane topics, such as a historical matter. One is called The Alt-Right of Japan, and the other one is called Immigration Bill, right? One on immigration in Japan. Now, there's so much to this because immigration in Japan is one of the hottest topics going at the moment, I think, in the world for everything. For people of my political persuasion, for a lot of stuff. It's one of the big things in the world because Japan, at its essence, is I don't know if it was a hermit kingdom. Maybe they called Korea that. I'm not sure, but it's known as a very insular society, right? They like to insular, by the way, is a word that's used as a derogatory word. I mean it just literally. They have a word for Japanese culture, preserving Japanese culture, all this kind of stuff, right? And so they're all about that, and it's in the heart of their DNA, even through World War II and all of it, and the kind of problems they have at the moment. It's still there. They still have it, and yet they're a highly technological society, and And I do feel like the global world order really, really wants to just get around all of this. So, I don't know. I feel like it's a big project. It's a big kind of globalist project. Japan is, and at the heart of that is immigration, because to the globalists, it's not just about immigration. It's also about corporate integration and all of this stuff, bringing down trade barriers and stuff like that, right? But the reason immigration is very important is because, well, it matters more, I suppose you could say, but also because they could do lowering trade barriers and corporate integration and all of that stuff with Japan. And even if a lot of Japanese nationalists wouldn't like it, it's kind of invisible. So you can envision yourself being able to get that through, get that passed. Immigration is the tough one because it's right there in your face, and it's more human, it's more emotional, it's all of that, right? So they know this is the tip of the spear on this battle between the ultimate kind of, like nationalist. It really is. Japan potentially is like the ultimate nationalist society, historically and presently, in its own way, and it's at a crossroads and all of this. So there's loads to that. And of course, the reason I brought up Keelings earlier is that you have, for those who aren't Irish, Keelings was basically the fruit pickers they're bringing into Europe, blah blah blah, right? All of that whole argument. The reason they need immigrants apparently is to look after old people, to pick fruit, to shuck oysters, or whatever. So, and that's the same arguments that are being used on us are being used on them, but they are a much more resistant target. Ireland just rolled over easy peasy, right? But Japan has got an immune system against this stuff. So it's very interesting to see. The other thing I found interesting about this is that the guys, as they're speaking about these topics, again, they're not saying anything too outlandish, right? But they are being full-on kind of corporate globalist type people in a way. The interesting thing about this is that they're speaking to each other. They're on this small channel, which is just a kind of a side point to their own agency, or it's a wing of it. The YouTube channel to them probably isn't a big deal. They don't expect it to be getting massive views or any of this, right? This video is 2,000. It's not a huge thing. So it's a little niche, right? It's only insiders maybe watching this, people who are interested. So you have two guys who are talking to each other about the Japanese economy, immigration, blah, 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 politics. And you have these two globalist, economist, capitalist type liberal people who are very smart. So they're worth listening to. No point listening to idiots. They're very smart, but also they're speaking to each other, and they feel like through the camera or through to the audience, it feels like they're speaking to each other. It feels like some of these economist guys in a room talking to each other, not speaking as if they're talking to a broad audience and being kind of selective and being Machiavellian and political. No, they're just speaking to each other. They're in their own environment, having that conversation as they would have it kind of privately, it feels like to me. And it exposes everything. And it's not just about Japan. Because it's about us too. Look at Keelings, look at global economic integration and all of this globalization. It matters to us as well. And this is just a nice little example of it. And I just think the fact that it's Japan, everything, it just evokes and crystallizes a lot of what's going on all over. Anyway. I shouldn't try to elaborate myself any further. What I want to do is just watch this video with you. I'll skip through it maybe a bit here and there because it's, this one's 10 minutes, the other one's 15, 20 minutes. I don't know. If you feel bad, me just making you watch videos, look, what can I say? I'll pause here and there. I might just watch 2 or 3 minutes at a time, whatever. So this is, but trust me, it's worth it. There's a lot in here. Again, I hope I've sold it to you in the last while. You're getting a chance to watch these guys talk to each other in the way they talk about things. They're talking about a country that is naturally resistant to immigration, and they're speaking over it. And that's why it matters. So my sound probably won't work, as it usually fails to. But yeah, it probably won't. So let's just do a quick check there. Are you hearing anything? How's that? I'm just going to wait for chat there to tell me if you're no. Okay. Cool. I can fix that, I think. Bum.
They're hoping to close it up by the 10th of December.
How about that? Okay, so that was the second time I tried to play it. If it really doesn't work now, I'll be disappointed. That second time, I'm just playing it now.
That's when this current diet session ends. There's a lot of controversy.
Cool.
There's a lot of confusion.
So you can see the type of guys I'm talking about, you know, they just seem like normal enough, kind of suited guys, you know, that type of thing.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Tokyo on Fire. Today is November 27th, 2018. The immigration bill is now in council. It's now being discussed in the Diet. They're hoping to close.
So this video is from 2018. It's about a specific round with a specific bill. To me, that doesn't matter too much. It's kind of irrelevant. You know, it's moving in a direction. They're kind of like, oh, it's just this particular bit. What they're generally talking about is the immigration situation. I wouldn't focus too much on the bill. They do, but you know, it's kind of, it's a broader point. Anyway.
Close it up by the 10th of December. That's when this current Diet session ends. There's a lot of controversy. There's a lot of confusion. Michael, when are you going to immigrate?
Well, I'm immigrating right now. I have permanent residency, and that's one of the issues that's involved here, in that these persons who are going to be receiving a new visa status, there will be 14 new industries that will be allowed to bring in basically manual labor,
right,
which is up until now been very difficult.
Okay, so straight away, here's the other thing that's important about this, right? He says it's straight away manual labor, right? There's no, you would never hear this in Ireland. You would never hear this in Ireland. You just wouldn't. And there's something else I want to show you actually, which is just kind of interesting. It's called it's called Society 5.0, I think. 5.0. I think it's kind of like an Ireland 2040 thing. It's not about immigration or any of that stuff. It's just about technological plan, kind of a 10-year plan or something like this in Japan. That's not really the essence of what I'm talking about here. I just want to show you something. It's like, here's some plan for Japan or whatever, you know, we're going to do this and that. And I just notice all of the graphics are kind of like, I think they're dark-haired, kind of whitish looking people. I think we can take all these people, the gray-haired kind of old Japanese man there, to be Japanese people. There we go again. So it just gets me thinking, like, in Japan, the conversation is much different. They're trying to do the exact same thing, but they dare not make every second person in every ad and every government promotion black and Middle Eastern and this and that. They don't have, they're not in a position to do that. Japan's very much more nationalist than we are in their bones. So, or at least at the moment. So you have this situation where they have to like deal with it. They have to deal with the fact that they can't just, in Ireland, they wouldn't say manual labor. They'd go, we're bringing people in because of love, you know, and they would just have to say it like that. They don't, whereas here they're just like, in Japan, there's such little taboo about racism and universalism, and you have to love everybody and everybody's the same and whatever, that the conversation, they can't really have the conversation on the love, lollipops and rainbows level, because the Japanese people, from what I can see, are just like, you know, they're like, we don't bow to, we're not under that kind of pressure that way, or in this kind of cult that Westerners are. So it kind of has to be sold in a different way. So it's just interesting that they have to be more realistic about it. He just says manual labor. So I don't know. And there's plenty more where that came from. But
industries that will be allowed to bring in basically manual labor,
right,
which is up until now been very difficult to bring into the country.
Well, following on the success of the temporary workers law.
Well, there is all kinds of laws, including the immigration of Brazilians and Peruvians under that special.
Brazilians and Peruvians. Like, I mean, again, it's to me, it's a travesty. It's like, I don't know, it's like in Ireland, it's a lot of Brazilians. I don't know why. Like, why would you do that to Japan? Like, I'm not some kind of, whatever the word is, Sinophile, that's for China, I think. I'm not some Japanese file, particularly. But I do have a soft spot for it as a nationalist country and a kind of civilized country, you know. So I don't know. It seems obscene to me.
Immigration law that was established in the bubble years in order to bring them in to do the 3Ks work.
Didn't quite work, did it?
It didn't quite work out, and that's part of the entire discussion.
There's a bit of a legacy here, right?
All the legacy of all these different programs.
The 3Ks, I think, translated to English, stand for dirty, dangerous, and demanding work. So Keelings, basically.
In the case of the Nikkei Jin version, a clearly racial program that was not based on language skills, was not based on any kind of interest in Japan, was based simply on having parents or grandparents with or.
So they're criticizing basically what was an ethno-national policy that Japan had at some point. Again, I don't know all the weeds, but you know, he's kind of kvetching about it, shall we say?
Simply a Japanese surname.
Right.
That didn't work out. So that there are all these legacy programs that didn't work out that inform the current plan, which is to basically, well, more than double the number of people who are under the trainee program, opening up a whole bunch of new industries to having these trainees who, up until now, that program has been extreme.
So what they're doing at the moment, I'm aware of, as well as getting like international students and international temporary workers and putting them in the countryside and villages and all this stuff. They're trying every little trick in the book to because I think with diversity and diversification of people, of nations, I think once you get that kind of 5-10% in there, and then you ramp up the propaganda and you start the blackmail and all that kind of stuff, they can go from there. So they're trying to find, I think, to my mind anyway, they're trying to find their kind of foothold or their beachhead to go from, and they're shucking and jiving in all sorts of ways to make that happen. It's really sad to watch. I think a lot of nationalists in the West have been watching this with kind of sadly or whatever for a couple of years now.
Extremely fraught, and
a lot of criticism,
both domestically and internationally, as basically a form of indentured servitude.
Right, it's a scam. It's the Japanese government is scamming people. Come work in our country.
Indentured servitude. Okay, so what do you call Keelings? You know, so what they want. He'll say this in a second. I'm spoiling it here, but what they're giving out about now is, and this really is annoying. What they're giving out about is the fact that. So first, they want to force on the Japanese people against their wishes, effectively, right? Foreigners as workers or whatever. And then they'll sell it as like, hey, it's just the only way they can sell it to them. It's just temporary. We just bring them in and they go home. Will you agree to that? And maybe people kind of half agree to that. Or at least the politicians can get away with it. But then the same guys who sold them on that will come back at the end of it and say, oh, well, you can't just do that. If they're going to come in and shuck oysters for you for 2 years or whatever, which originally we were the ones who pushed that idea on you, but now actually we've changed our mind. That's actually mean. You have to now give them citizenship rights, basically, like equal rights in the nation to anybody else. And effectively, at the end of the day, we all know this, it's citizenship. What they're saying is you just need to let these people in. And also, to be honest, that border that you let them in through, kind of start reducing that too as well. Stop making that so tough. This is what they're driving at. There's no lie. Like, you know, they always move this ball. Their goal is very clear from the start. And these guys, as the conversation goes on, they don't really pretend otherwise, you know, and that's why it's interesting.
A form of indentured servitude.
Right, it's a scam. It's the Japanese government is scamming people. Come work in our country.
Learn something.
And then after you do your labor, go back to your country and take that technology with you.
But that's what they sold it as originally. That's what these kind of guys, these economist people would have sold it as originally, as their beachhead. That's what the original, to my mind, which was the temporary, there was a German word for it, after World War II when they brought the Turks in as temporary workers, right? Temporary workers, this was in the 1950s. Try walking around Berlin in 2020, right? You'll find out how temporary those workers were. It's the same every time.
After you have had your learning experience. And the learning experience can be 3 years of shucking oysters.
Right.
And that's all you get. And you get paid less than the minimum wage in many cases. Many of the employers.
But that's why they're bringing these people in. That's why. So suddenly they get humanitarian about the way the migrant workers are treated. It's very strange. But we need to bring them in because they're an economic necessity. And we'll get to the root of this as I go on. But anyway, as
do
we
that,
go.
and they fear no retribution. Frequently, they've been caught taking the passports of their workers, making it impossible for them to leave, and we've had several thousand flee from their workplaces. And that was another aspect of this current bill, not only that the current system doesn't really work, and the government has been utterly irresponsible. It farmed the entire thing out to a nonprofit to be the managers and overseers of this basically government program.
So, okay, so I'm just going to kind of talk ahead of the video here and give my kind of give my spiel away here. Is that these guys? Okay, so the order of this is hard to do. These guys are not nobodies. They have in this other one here. He's talking to what's her name? Patricia Floor. She's the ambassador of the ambassador of the EU to Japan. A thing I didn't even know existed, EU ambassadors, but anyway, they do. So he's talking to ambassadors, and she wouldn't sit down with me, right? She sits down. These guys are insiders, pure insiders, and they know everyone. And I'll get onto that in a while too. In this kind of basically this shadow global government, this type of thing that exists in Ireland, it exists in Japan. These guys who talk about the way they talk about how the politicians in the Diet, which is the Japanese kind of parliament of sorts, the way they talk about it is that, and they don't say this explicitly, this is just my impression, they're talking about something as if, by the tone, their tone, it feels as though they and their own circles of people have already decided that this is going to happen. They know it's going to happen. They've told the politicians that it's going to happen and that it must happen. And as they're talking about the politicians and how they're working it out in this Diet, they're kind of talking about it like they're working it out, but the conclusion is inevitable. So we're watching them kind of bicker and play games and use things as kind of PR moves against each other and stuff. But ultimately, this is just going to happen. And they refer to the people. The people, oh, it's very controversial. Most people don't want it, blah, blah, blah. But that's just the kind of word they would use is a stumbling block that we just must get over. And again, it's like these guys, if you, and I've spoken to some people like this, when you kind of bring up your point to them, you go, what about, what does people want? They'll almost roll their eyes at you. Like, oh, we have an idealist here. We've an idealist or something like that. And it's like, it's not an idealism or some pie in the sky idealism to say, I don't think people should be forced to take, basically, I think people should have rights. Call me a liberal if you want. Maybe I'm the real liberal, right? They're the real whatevers. But in that, I do think people should have rights. And their kind of answer would be, well, they do have rights. This is being done democratically and stuff. But it's like, yeah, but the whole thing is rigged from the start, right? You're rigging it so that if the liberal government get in, the progressive one, assuming that's how Japan works, the progressive ones, the more globalist ones get in, then they'll push it through. And if the conservative ones get in, they'll also push it through, but they'll be a bit different about it. And they'll kind of have to drag their, just like Trump with immigration. I have a siren here, sorry. Hope they're okay. But yeah, so it's kind of like with Trump, it's like there is this government above and beyond elected parliament or whatever. And it's just, I don't know, it's just fascinating to hear these people talk, the way they talk about it in that kind of frame.
Putting at one remove responsibility, and they have none of the resources to keep an eye on all of these people who are in right now agricultural, fisheries, and a few other industries as trainees, supposedly learning from on the job.
Do you know, he's completely John Malkovich. It just hit me. But anyway.
Instead, it's been a shambles, and the opposition right now has just been going down through the list of everything that's been wrong with the program so far, and then how are you going to prevent these things from happening?
Right. The Japanese government has kicked this ball down the path for a long time. They basically ignored it, even though.
But why does it have to be a ball? Why can't they just kick the ball over the wall into a well, right? Why do they have to keep kicking it down the road? And again, I'm going to kind of step over the talking points here. I'm just going to come out with it, right? My problem with this liberal world order, right? These two Yanks, right? Capitalist liberals, is that they'll say, well, Japan should bring in migrants, right? Because they need to or something. And then they say, well, they should just as temporary or whatever. But then when they bring them in as temporary, they go, oh, well, you must have them just forever. because of course the workers must go with the labor or with the moving capital and the whole globalist kind of general agenda. And they keep moving the argument, right? And then ultimately, even if you smack down those arguments and go, well, these people have rights and they should just not do that. They should just increase, as with Keelings, they should just increase the Japanese companies should just increase the pay for, shucking oysters and doing these 3K jobs, these kind of dirty, dangerous and demanding jobs, right? Increase the pay. Don't just have it that you can sit in some office and make a lot of money. But if you're an oyster person, you don't get oyster shucker, you don't get, well, if it's hard work, pay them the money it takes to get someone to do the hard work, blah, 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 right? I've made these arguments. And then what they will come back to, then they'll go, yes, but Japan doesn't even have the people. Japan has such a low population rate and all of this that they'll do as these economists, people always do, they'll go, it's not me saying it. I don't have ideology. I'm just telling you what it is. And you go, you do have ideology, right? Again, this guy here, Langley or whatever his name is, right? These guys, they are in a sense descendants of General Douglas MacArthur and his the post-Japanese, post-World War II occupation of Japan and the remodeling of Japan, right? In America's image, or in the globalist kind of image, one and the same thing. And my problem is with these guys, if you think of these guys and MacArthur and what happened 70 odd years ago as a kind of a lineage, right? Because they are, I mean, they basically are. I go, so your ultimate retreat is to say, well, Japan must do this the way we want them to. But ultimately what it comes back to is, well, actually, it's not us. It's not what we want. It's just the way it is. And you go, it is the way it is because of you guys. Who were the ones who, after Japan got beaten in World War II, one of the programs in the occupation and because the Americans wrote Japan's constitution, was putting women to work. Why would that be? Like, that's bizarre. Like, I understand potentially the post-war model for Japan. They were saying, okay, the Zaibatsu led to like fascism somehow. I don't know how, but I don't know. We could argue it maybe because of military-industrial complex or something, and ultra-nationalist stuff like to say Japan, or I don't know what the Japanese nationalism was then, but something about like Japan must, like sun and steel, the blood of sacrifice and all this kind of stuff, right? This kind of ultra-nationalist stuff. Okay, maybe you could say that has to go. You could say all sorts of stuff. But where does women going to work come into it, right? Like what did that have to do with demilitarizing Japan, or like, de-radicalizing them, so to speak, right? I can understand that one victor wants to say prevent the loser from revolting a year later and going back to war, right? But what does putting women to work have to do with it? And various kind of progressive kind of things like that, which are ultimately, they're not progressive or lovey-dovey. They're capitalist, right? It's to get you've doubled the consumer force, double the workforce. And you guys are the ones who did that to Japan. You've created the situation whereby now your solutions are necessary. Like, at what point do you take responsibility for your own ideology? And that's the thing, ultimately. This is why I don't fear argument with these economists. They're good, but they're not good, right? We can be better. Is that the key with these kind of capitalist, liberal type people, economist type people, is to force them to take ownership of their ideology, right? And that involves a couple of things, which is, it's forcing them, right? So, in rhetoric and all of that. But the other thing is to establish that they have an ideology to take ownership of, because they will deny that that is their ultimate tactic. Their ultimate thing is to say, I don't have an ideology. My ideology is a neutral. It's a vacuum. It's a nothing. No, you have an ideology, right? Again, your ideology, they could say, well, to me, let's say about protectionism in Ireland, if you do protectionism, it's flawed. It's been shown to be flawed. It works in certain ways, but it comes with problems. And I would go, like I said in some streams before, well, your ideology leads to problems where you need to import hundreds of Georgians to pick strawberries during a global pandemic. That's a problem, right? You having to kind of subvert Japanese, I won't say democracy like in the voting sense, but I mean that too, but the will of the Japanese people more broadly, like beyond votes and parliaments and stuff, just the majority will, the popular will. You have to subvert that, and even you yourself are acknowledging all the problems and all the headaches that come with it. You're talking about how difficult and hard, like it all is, and almost borderline impossible, and such a challenge. You're the one talking about that. Why do you need to do that? You need to do that because of your ideology stemming back to World War II, stemming back to these various liberal reforms you put into Japan that were also inserted into European countries, and obviously founded in America, or arguably. And now we have these problems. Your ideology is responsible for us needing to do your apparent solutions, right? So fuck you. Basically, you're just a problem from start to finish. We need new ideas, better ideas, different ideas. You've made mistakes. You've caused these problems. That's a big thing with these people. And at no point would they acknowledge this. They would say, "Oh, these problems are created by people like us." But no, they will stick to their belief that equality, in the sense that everybody's the same and interchangeable, men, women, ethnicities, this, that. They'll stick to that, which is just basically a money-making racket. I don't think they believe it. It's just more efficient. They believe that free trade, global free trade, is the highest goal. And the general set of beliefs they have, they stick to those, and they need to be challenged on those. I'll think of it in a sec. Let's just watch.
This tidal wave of needs, industry needs for agricultural needs for workers, and regular Japanese are fleeing the rural areas. They're coming into the cities.
And the big wave that's coming is taking care of the very old.
Mm-hmm.
Again, why are Japanese fleeing the rural areas for the cities? There are reasons for all of this. Again, in a nationalist economy, and they get into this in other videos, it's part of their free trade thing, right? If you have cheap, potatoes, cheap grapes, cheap whatever coming from Spain, but picked by Bulgarians, and this kind of stuff, right? This race to the bottom economic order. Well, yeah, your farmers can't compete, so people in Tokyo end up eating Bulgarian strawberries or whatever, right? So then the rural hinterland is dead because there's nothing there for it, right? So they flee to the cities, and now you're talking about then they just reinsert it as a problem that they need to fix. It's a desperate chain. And just rhetorically, we need to be able to and prepared to intervene in these things and go, whoa, these are all your problems.
So Kaigo, having people there to watch.
Kaigo, okay, so old people who need to be looked after now, apparently, same as in Ireland, by foreigners. The only way we can prevent our old people from rotting in their own excrement, apparently, is to bring in Brazilians. It's that's a society that you people have created, right? This thing of the upside down pyramid of demographics, the liberal culture, the breakdown of family order, all of this stuff. This all comes back to a Western American liberal global ideology, that you enforced at the end of a gun 70 years ago. You have to take ownership of that, not the Japanese people.
Senior citizens 24 hours a day. If they're incontinent, to change their diapers, to feed them, all these things. There is a dearth of hundreds of thousands of workers in that industry already. There are places begging because the pay in that industry is so low.
Right.
Basically, you don't.
Again, because the pay in that industry is so low, why shouldn't the pay, again, glossed over, why not just increase the pay? I mean, you could talk about that having other problems and stuff, but let's start with that. Let's just defend, sir. Defend the why. Why is that an assumption? Why are you assuming because the pay is so low as something that just happens and just is what it is? No, it isn't just what it is, right? You could pay them more. You could see what happens.
Want to be involved in it, and it's excruciating work. It's emotionally trying work, and the dream.
It's horrible. It's emotionally trying work, looking after elderly people. Again, people should be doing this for their own parents, right? It's not a civilized society that does this care home thing. Now, I know sometimes people are in a bad way medically and stuff, and in the West, a lot of people aren't in a position to look after their elders because of the way society is. It's this common thing of blaming individuals versus society. I tend to look at society, because if everyone is doing the same thing, then it's not like they're all just randomly making a choice, right? There are certain incentives and carrots and sticks. Society has rigged it so that that's a very hard thing to do. It's like people saying, oh, well, why don't people just have 4 or 5 kids each, right? It's like, because they didn't all just stop because they decided to, because it's not feasible anymore. And countries used to try to make that feasible. That was the name of the game, right? So all of these assumptions, and just this whole thing of like, oh, it's emotionally trying work, so we need a Brazilian to look after your mother or your father or your grandmother or grandfather. It's so smarmy. And again, I'm not directing hate at these guys. They're just two honest guys talking to each other about the world they're like part of. So whatever, I appreciate it.
Theme is that there are hundreds of thousands of East Asians, basically, who want to come to do that work here in Japan. Right. All we have to do is create a visa program that allows them to do so.
Well, it seems to me that they just want a job. They want a livelihood, and they think that coming to Japan, it's obviously it's better than where their country is, and maybe they will pick up a skill.
That's the thing. Those countries are all developing economically, and the pay scale, the difference.
So in one sense, it's just about picking up a skill. And another sense, you can't just have them pick up a skill and throw them out a few years later. You have to give them more. Which one is it, right? It moves around.
Just absolutely a chasm.
Right.
But now it's getting closer and closer. And the thought that many of them are going to come to Japan, first of all, in the tens and the hundreds of thousands, if they're allowed to do so, to fill these jobs, that these will be their best people, that they will be able to integrate themselves. The opposition says that's ludicrous. Yeah. That's not that. What is the basis of your calculations? And that fell apart. That fell apart because
they didn't know their Excel sheets didn't work.
Their Excel sheets shouldn't work. That was another thing. They had statistics on how well everything was working with the current trainee program, and the opposition just pointed out, you made up all these figures. These figures don't actually exist there, and they went back and they found out you're right.
Yeah,
and that's where they hit the wall, because within the LDP there is great opposition to increasing immigration, or at least with some members, and it passed through the General Council meeting, but just barely. And there are all these guys in the background going, blah, 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 we don't like that, new immigrants, blah, 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 what are we going to do with our constituents? There's that. And there are virulent anti-immigrant groups that have so far been strong supporters of the Abe administration, and they feel betrayed by this new immigration.
Right.
And so in order to appease them and assuage them and tell them, oh, it's not so bad, they have made no internal research about what the numbers are of the people, how many are needed, how many are demanded by industry,
how many are going to bring their family,
how many they've kept that entirely. They have just simply not done the research, so as to be able to say, well, this is just a framework,
right?
And the opposition just says, you're going to open up the system without any numbers. That's crazy,
right?
And it has been.
Okay, I went for a quick pit stop there, away from the computer for a second, which felt irresponsible. Am I okay and stuff? I'm back, right? I hope you didn't mind that there.
Back and forth, and it's been petty at times. The opposition wants Mr. Abe personally to say, this is an immigration bill.
Right.
And he goes up there and he says, no, it's not an immigration bill. It's a permanent residency visa extension bill. And then he sits down and they say, but it's really an immigration bill, isn't it? And there's been a lot of that. And that hasn't played well for the opposition.
It bothers me so much how they're talking about it so cynically, how the Japanese government are having to shuck and jive. They're having, oh, look at them having to move around this stuff, deal with this. And what they're dealing with are these hordes of pitchfork wielders, i.e. the Japanese people, who en masse don't want this. And they're like just talking about it so cynically. Again, it's like, am I some silly ideologue here? Am I starry-eyed here for just saying, maybe you just shouldn't do that, you know? Maybe let Japanese society just iron itself out without doing that to them.
position. The prime minister and the cabinet's ratings have stayed stable or risen during this procedure, even though if you look at the give and take in the diet, they're getting the administration's getting slapped around.
But admittedly, I mean, this place is a difficult place to assimilate into. I mean, the country itself being available for social services, that sort of thing, that this new class, and it really does.
Okay, so if it's difficult to integrate into, and it's difficult to, everything's difficult about it, why not just not do it? I mean, that's the whole point of nations. Like Japan has a different language, its own territory, its own culture, its own familial relationships and stuff, right? I mean, it lends itself most ideally to it just being Japanese people for the most part, right? Why not just go with it? Someone in the chat a while ago said globalism is anti-nature, and I thoroughly agree.
Kind of create a new class, doesn't it?
It does,
creates
absolutely new class
of laborers.
Yeah, and it's a new class, and it's going to have. Will it have full access to the nation's health system? What will be the guarantees that these people don't flee from their jobs? Won't it bleed off people from the existing program, and they'll flow into this new visa program with its new longer stay? All these numbers that need to be nailed down before a piece of legislation can be passed are not available.
And the social impact is really, I mean, you can't put a cap on this. Once people come in, even if it's a small portion, a minority, some people will stay. They'll assimilate, they'll learn the language, their kids will go to school, and they'll get married to.
So they've just listed out problem after problem after problem that will need to be dealt with by the Japanese government and Japanese society. I'm noticing a big trend in this from these type of people is that one of their tactics, it seems, is just piling problem upon problem upon problem, creating it, putting it on you, and then making you responsible for fixing it. Or, what are you going to do about this? What are you going to do about that? The other, what are you going to do about all the Georgians and Albanians in Cahersiveen or whatever it happens to be, who now are stuck in close proximity to each other with COVID-19? Well, I'd say that'd be a you problem, not a me problem. I'd say that'd be a NGO, Fine Gael, EU problem, and not the Irish people problem. You created this problem, right? These people didn't need to be. These people aren't refugees. These people aren't fleeing anything. Almost down to a man. That's a you problem. You created this problem, not me. I don't know why we all have to fix it, and it's this constant merry-go-round.
To Japanese citizens, and they have rights too.
And they will, and they also, some of them will get involved in criminal cases.
This is
people
great.
have brought up the fact that the number of translators that we have working in the justice system is shrinking, and they'd have to increase if they're going to have more of these defendants, whether it's just simply for visa violations. That the internal.
Well, okay, like again, why should Japanese people have to worry about the problem that they won't have enough translators for all of the foreign people who are going to be going through their criminal justice system? Like, why should that be a problem that they even have to fix? Why shouldn't that be a problem that they just avoid having in the first place?
Mechanics, the necessary infrastructure to accept these new immigrants is not there. And again, the government has just been stonewalling. Everything will be fine. This will all work out.
Right. But as they hold their nose and they say, we really don't want you, but we need you, that's kind of inevitable too.
Not certainly, but the people who are saying we need you is the Keidanren. It's the business lobby that has pushed this really, really hard. And
again, so if you could ask that question, why is it that this is happening at all if most Japanese people don't want it? And it's the same as here. It's the same as here. It's not about love and bubbles and lollipops and rainbows. It's because the business community are pushing for it really hard. Don't be fooled by the language they put on this ever about you being racist and it's all about anti-racism. It's all about love and equality. No, it's as he said at the start, cheap manual labor, free movement of labor to match free movement of capital, and because the business community want it. That's all it's about. Completely, you have to defend your moral high ground on this stuff always, and never embrace the position that you're a bad guy or you're hateful or any of this stuff. Right? You're not. This is the highest moral ground belongs to us on this stuff, I think.
It's the business lobby that has pushed this really, really hard. And it's certain industries. Kaigo, we talked about one of them. Construction is the other, and there's an absolute dearth there for restaurants and the comfort industry, for hotels, etc.
Oh, you see the impact even today.
Oh, even today,
Right.
but there's been liberalization, for example, of house cleaning. So now the house cleaning industry is now hiring for the first time non-Japanese in their we come to your house, we clean it up kind of service. That's great. It's wonderful. It's having a cosmopolitan.
It's great. It's wonderful. I think he's every line he's coming. And by the way, this guy is a lecturer at what's his name? He's a lecturer at Michael Kukek or something like that. He's a lecturer, which goes to show you how poisonous universities generally kind of are in terms of any social science. You have this guy who is he's teaching in or something in Tokyo, some university, right? Temple University, Japan campus, something like that, right? Social sciences. Just think of how poisonous it is to have a guy like this in Japan espousing this point of view. He's in the lectures telling the students what's up, right? Telling young, impressionable people what the story is. And we'll get on to where the other people he works for in a second, right? Which is really important. So stay tuned. But listen to him here.
Up kind of service. That's great. It's wonderful. It's having.
It's wonderful for it's wonderful foreign house cleaners. It's amazing. And he says something about cosmopolitanism.
That's great. It's wonderful. It's having a cosmopolitan society is super. But
what's super about it? What's great about it? All of these assumptions piled on assumptions pile on assumptions. It's great. It's wonderful to have a What's wonderful about it? Because again, make them answerable for the consequences of their ideology. You have to tell me. Take Dublin, for example, right? In Ireland. What's wonderful about, take O'Connell Street in the centre of Dublin, right? What's wonderful about seeing a junkie every 20 meters dying in front of you, right? Some mother's son. What's wonderful about everyone else being a foreigner who you can't share a pleasantry with, really? Because they'll be like, what? Having homeless people everywhere, which I'm not blaming homeless people or foreigners or junkies, right? The victims, the two of them are anyway. The foreigners just are what they are. What's great about that? Take O'Connell Street again to go on that even more. The street being Starbucks, McDonald's, casino, Starbucks, casino, with desperately grim people coming in and out of all of them, right? Drunk people, ruining their lives when they're young, basically. I'm not against a bit of crack, right? But, I mean, a lot of people are a little bit lost, right? I'm not trying to claim everyone's depressed and anxious and fucked up or whatever, but just there's a lot of it, right? It's like you're answerable for all of that with your cosmopolitan society. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. It's not wonderful. Okay, it isn't.
You're going to have an increase, a massive increase over a short period of time without preparation, as happened with the Brazilians and the Peruvians.
Right.
Then you're asking for trouble, is what the opposition is saying.
Okay, Michael, we have less than 2 weeks before the Diet votes on this. What do you think is going to happen? Do you think they're going to vote for it, or they're going to turn it down and push it off to another session?
It's the only thing that Mr. Abe has this session. He's not going to get a peace treaty with the Russians by December. He's not going to get a constitutional revision clause out, which he tried to do and pushed very hard to do in this extraordinary Diet session. This is the issue. And if they don't get it done, then what was this extraordinary Diet session for will become the question.
So I don't want to put words in your mouth.
They're going to push it, they're going to pass it, and the numbers will have to come later.
I agree. That's right.
And everybody will be ready to point fingers at who was to blame when things go bad.
Right. Tokyo on Fire, immigration, a word that is very difficult to pronounce in Japanese.
Okay, so we have these guys, completely blasé, conversation over, right? We just talked it out. Oh yeah. No consideration for people, no consideration for human beings. Like, I don't know, the only consideration they have allegedly is for like, well, when we bring on all these oyster shuckers and whatever else, then you have to keep them permanently and you have to they have to have access to your healthcare system and everything else, right? Constantly moving goalposts with these guys. Now, I was going to leave this to last and go through another 2 videos, but this has gone on for a while already, so maybe I will cut to the chase and come back to the other videos a different night. Because if we do watch those ones, by the time I cut to the chase, you might all be gone. So I was kind of like, these guys are smart guys, interesting, they know a lot, a very valuable resource, but who are they? And I usually my first thing is follow the money, but I just said for a while, I'm not going to. I'll just listen to them at face value. I can tell they're kind of globalist, but who cares where, whatever. Let's just listen to the substance. And then just before streaming tonight, I did just Google them quickly, and it's so it's Langley Esquire, which is a so it's not just a YouTube channel, right? It's Langley Esquire, over 30 years experience in Japan's public affairs. Tokyo-based Langley Esquire is the premier public affairs consultancy dedicated to resolving issues in Japan's unique regulatory environment. We overcome challenges at the nexus of government, business, and society. So I'll skip on. We're fully equipped to advise international executives and multinational corporations on government relations, advocacy, and crisis management issues in Japan. Key services. So, I mean, government. Keep in mind, this guy's lecturing people at a university as well, the kind of John Malkovich looking guy. So all of this kind of like gibberish talk, stakeholder, this and that, what are they really talking about? Stakeholder and issue mapping. Implementing an effective government relations strategy begins with identifying both the key players and the decision makers involved. Our intimate understanding of the political landscape is vital to making use of time and resources. So they know politicians, they know how to get around all of this kind of stuff. Media and policy monitoring. Timely awareness of political developments that could impact your industry is essential. Legislation likely to pass the diet demands attention, blah, blah, blah. Strategic communications, advocacy, coalition building, public procurement. There's another little bit they had here as well. Corporate advisory, PR and communications. Media relations. Our team offers a powerful network covering all the top-tier Japanese media channels, from features in leading newspapers to TV, online publications through paid advertising. We help you to leverage your budget to achieve maximum exposure. I mean, I've talked about this with, who was it I talked about? It was a regime regime PR. I did that. I think that was my most recent stream in Ireland. It's all like euphemisms or whatever for basically like, we know Japan, you pay us and we'll do your bidding. So, if I came to these guys with a big wait, Dragon Energy. Oh, the chat sometimes, like, I like you, but Dragon Energy says, who funds them, Garrod? Funds and caps. They're a PR firm. Get to the point. Get to the point. I mean, I'm getting to the point. They're a PR agency, so they're funded by corporations, obviously, right? Comments like that. I'm sorry, just imagine being in a pub and speaking to someone like that. It's so silly. So they're basically funded by corporations to open up. I mean, that's the agenda, basically, open up Japan for. So my point is, when you come back to this immigration discussion, I mean, it was pretty transparent as it was, but if you thought these guys were some kind of, these are lefty cultural Marxists or whatever, then they're not. They're just paid by all of these business community people or whatever. And this one, in this other one, he's speaking to the ambassador to Japan for the EU. It's all a merry-go-round of money to promote this agenda, and they're just talking about the democratic will, or the kind of the popular will of the Japanese people, as if it's just a stumbling block that they just, or a ball that they have to kick down the road and get over. That's a tyranny. I mean, it is a full-on tyranny, and Ireland is worse. If you think this is bad, this is shocking for Japan. Japan is so much better than where we are. We are at the, if they are like a like if they're I don't know, decomposing, then we are absolutely rotten. We're gone. We're a sack of bones, right? Ireland is one of the most ravaged countries in the entire world by this stuff. It began like 30 odd years ago. You could say the ship has sailed. No, I never say it does, but I mean, it just raises a lot of questions for me about liberal democracy, about just liberalism in general. It's like it is a tyranny of its own. The democracy is just a complete veneer to everything else, and it's rigged from the start, so there's no point in it. I'm seeing what the chat is now. Someone might be triggered by oh wow, someone says he teaches the history of racism at university. I don't know if you're talking about the guy in the video, but any more word from Dragon Energy? Look up the board of directors. What's the point in doing that? These guys are the directors. The lecturer guy and your man and some other people. Yeah, as in those are it's just their agency. It's not so much a board of directors thing. Yeah. So I think that's basically it. I mean, they have another video here which is pretty juicy. It's called The Alt-Right of Japan, Japanese Politics 101. And it's a very good video. I might do that tomorrow night or some other night. At the moment, I'm reading a book called Atomic Bomb Suppressed. It's about censorship of Japan. They couldn't talk about that after the war. As America was bringing in their liberal free speech codes into Japan, they were also censoring them. So that also says a lot about liberalism. In the same as in Ireland, we have free speech and liberalism and all of this, but at the same time we have hate speech. So you can't talk about anything that they don't want you to talk about, basically. The classic contradiction. So I'll probably leave it there. There's something about Japan. It's just a perfect case study. I have a quote here I took from the book I'm reading today. Some interesting quotes from this. Just from that book. It's a really detailed analysis of censorship from 1946 to 1952. So they're talking about the complete records of the Supreme Commander of the Allied Forces, General Douglas MacArthur. Those records were released in 1977, and they say, although very poorly organized, they gave an insight into one of the most extensive attempts at social engineering ever, the remaking of Japan in the image of American democracy. So it's what happened in Ireland. It's what ultimately kind of happened in Britain and all over the world, or many parts of the world, except with us, it happened kind of loosely or kind of piecemeal, and it's hard to get your hands around. In Japan, it was a strictly outlined program after having 2 atomic bombs dropped in them, and it was very straightforward. It was not vague at all. It was very straightforward and very planned out, and ultimately over time has been documented quite well. So there's a lot we can learn from it. I think there's a lot of keys we can unlock, or locks we can unlock, keys we can find by looking at this subject. That's what I think. Joel asks me if there are any reviews coming up. And myself and a few of the lads read Norwegian Wood by Murakami. And I think it is worth the discussion, especially seeming as a few of us have read it. And I did think it was a good novel or whatever. It's just not particularly hard-hitting, like political nationalist stuff or whatever. It's just a kind of a novel about life and various things. I think we will do a review of that probably this week, Norwegian Wood. It's a good book. If you can get it on Kindle, if you have a Kindle, you might be able to read it beforehand. But yeah, I'll leave it there. So I will see you tomorrow night. I'm not quite sure what it'll be tomorrow night. So Norwegian Wood maybe later in the week. Tomorrow night I might just do more of what I'm reading on this Japan subject. And of course, I'm always trying to relate it back to our own current predicament. So I think it's kind of relevant in that sense. So yeah, ihawa, thanks for watching. See you.